On this Sunday night, dwindling hope for peace in Gaza. The stalemate in negotiations and the latest attacks from both sides. As Holocaust Remembrance Day is marked. A bridge buckles in Brazil. The destruction from powerful floodwaters. Frustration over rising baby formula prices. Potential ways to shrink the cost. Plus, Madonna, mover, shaker, and record breaker. The epic concert making history.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
I say to the leaders of the world, no amount of pressure, no decision by any international forum will stop Israel from defending itself. And I say to you, we will defeat our genocidal enemies.
In a defiant speech at a Holocaust memorial event in Jerusalem tonight, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to resist international pressure to halt the war in Gaza. Earlier today, along the border to the enclave, Israeli soldiers could be seen preparing their tanks for battle. The country's defense minister warning of a, quote, powerful operation in the very near future in Rafah and other places all across Gaza. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Going into the weekend, there were high hopes of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas as negotiations showed some signs of progress in Cairo, Egypt. But now both sides are at an impasse. The Hamas delegation left Cairo today after accusing Netanyahu of sabotaging truce talks. While Netanyahu himself says it's the reverse and that any permanent ceasefire deal for hostages would allow for Hamas to regroup and reoffend. Redmond Shannon kicks off our coverage tonight in a warning that the story might be disturbing to some viewers.
Despair after another deadly Israeli airstrike, this time near a school housing displaced Palestinians in central Gaza. 7 months of grief and death, and despite ongoing peace talks, there is little hope that this will end soon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel cannot accept Hamas's demand that his troops withdraw permanently from Gaza, saying again that Israel is only ready to offer a pause in fighting to free hostages.
And in the big picture, what we see is that there's no mainstream Israeli leader, no mainstream Israeli party that would accept any kind of permanent ceasefire that would allow Hamas to reconstitute itself.
Professor Oral Braun believes it's unlikely Hamas and Israel will find a common ground in peace talks, especially one that could avert Israel's promise to invade the city of Rafah.
Any reasonable individual would like to see an end of bloodshed. But the problem has been that no one has found a magical solution.
On Sunday, Hamas's armed wing says it fired the rockets that landed near the busier of the two border crossings into southern Gaza. It said the checkpoint was not the target, but Israel closed the Kerem Shalom crossing to aid trucks and claimed the missiles were fired from near Rafah. Just days ago, Israel reopened the northern Erez crossing for the first time since the October 7th Hamas attacks.
The UN organizations, what they're saying to us in the assessment that they're sharing with us is that there is enough humanitarian aid making its way to the north, and that is also our assessment.
A spokesperson for the UN's relief agency in Gaza, UNRWA, told Global News that the amount of aid reaching those in need in Gaza is still, quote, by far not enough. She said 500 aid trucks a day are needed, but on average fewer than 200 a day made it into Gaza in April. Farah?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thank you. And you're looking at footage of television crews belonging to the Al Jazeera media network in Jerusalem hauling out gear from their offices. Israeli police raided the offices today and shut down the Qatari-based network's operations inside Israel. Al Jazeera is one of very few international news organizations with reporters on the ground in Gaza.
They have been loaded with intense humanitarian and psychological pressure as they are forced to secure the family members, afford them with the basic necessities, and to return back to report amid full collapse of security.
The move to shut down Al Jazeera is being criticized by analysts as an affront to Israel's strong democratic traditions. But the Netanyahu government believes the network is highly biased, calling it a threat to national security. On campuses across Canada and the U.S., it's been a tough balancing act between protecting free speech and countering hateful speech. While many anti-war demonstrations have been peaceful, many Jewish students say they feel unsafe on university grounds as the protests have gone beyond criticizing Israeli policies. David Akin reports on what the Prime Minister believes is the key to stopping hate speech.
Welcome to the Holocaust Museum.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visited Toronto's Holocaust Museum to mark Holocaust Remembrance Day.
This year's particularly difficult because of the events, the horrific attack of October 7th, which led Jews in Israel and around the world. Really.
Israel's subsequent war on Hamas, though, has resulted in the deaths of thousands of Palestinians, and that in turn sparked protests around the world, protests that recently spread to North American universities.
My message for the American students is that we are extremely proud, and their protests and their solidarity with Palestine and with Gaza gave us a glimpse of hope.
But recent protests on some university campuses have increased concerns about the safety of Jewish students, which in turn has sparked some counter-protests, like this one in Cairo Sunday.
We are here today to show solidarity for our students, the students of the Jewish community, all students as well, who deserve to be studying in a safe environment, free from hate and free from intimidation.
Elsewhere, some protests have veered into anti-Semitic hate, like this one recently at the Vancouver Art Gallery.
Long live October 7th!
Trudeau, like many political leaders in the West, has defended the right to protest, but has criticized speech he says causes harm.
Actions by Hamas, horrific, need to be condemned along with anyone who glorifies those actions.
The government believes some of that hateful speech springs from ignorance. And so, in the recent federal budget, it set aside $5 million for Holocaust education and remembrance programs to teach young people about the Nazis' systematic campaign during the Second World War that killed 6 million people.
Because what we really want to tell is the truth, what happened to us and how it all began.
There appears to be much work to do. A 2019 poll found that 1 in 5 Canadians did not know about the Holocaust.
As time goes on, fewer and fewer young people will be able to hear directly from Holocaust survivors.
David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
There is rising worry about the safety of federal politicians because of increasingly intense political anger and division, both on the streets and online. As Mackenzie Gray reports, it's causing some politicians to step away from politics altogether.
Axe the tax and spike the hike. It's the latest political tactic by the Conservatives to push back on the carbon tax.
Axe the tax!
Protests at Liberal and NDP constituency offices, organized by Conservative members, part of a deliberate strategy.
We are going to start a massive pressure campaign in Parliament, but you need to back me up on the ground. How many will organize protests out of Liberal constituency offices to pressure them to do the right thing?
But the latest round of protests raising concerns from the Sergeant-at-Arms, the official in charge of keeping parliamentarians safe. Global News obtained an email sent to all 338 MPs saying they should have a locked door policy at their constituency office. If an appointment with a constituent is necessary, members or their employees should consider virtual meetings for the foreseeable future.
If they need help with immigration issues, if they need help with, their taxes or any of those services that my team provide to our constituents, they won't be able to access those tomorrow.
I have a panic button that I take around with me.
That's Toronto area Liberal Pam Damoff, the latest MP to decide not to run in the next election due to the political climate.
The tone in Parliament and the toxicity out there is it's just not something I want to be part of anymore.
But it's not just Conservative tactics.
Mr. Speaker, the leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like.
He seems to want to burn everything down. It's a pyromaniac Polyev.
Members of all parties routinely use unparliamentary language inside and outside of the House of Commons.
I think all members of Parliament should do well to live by the norms of decency and civility and democracy.
To help facilitate additional security, the House of Commons will pay for the RCMP or local police to protect MPs, according to La Presse, to deal with an increasingly polarized political climate. Farah?
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mac. An Ontario couple who lost their 3-month-old son and his grandparents in a Wrongway police chase on Highway 401 say they don't have the courage to return to a home filled with their son's memories. In a statement, the couple says, "We are at a complete loss of words to describe the agony and vacuum in our hearts, knowing we could never hold our child, Aditya Viven, who gave us so many precious memories in such a short time, in our hands again." The child's grandmother and grandfather also died when their vehicle was hit by a robbery suspect who was being chased the wrong way down the highway by police. Dozens of people gathered in Winnipeg today to mark Red Dress Day. That's the annual day to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Red dresses represent the lives lost to gender-based violence in the Indigenous community. And Manitoba's capital has often been referred to as the epicenter of the crisis. Melissa Ridgen reports.
This year, nowhere is Red Dress Day more poignant than here, where families continue to wait for a search of a landfill for the remains of 3 murdered Indigenous women.
Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unidentified woman elders call Buffalo Woman are believed to have been killed and dumped in the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg, all victims of an alleged serial killer. The remains of a 4th victim, Rebecca Contois, were found in a Winnipeg dumpster and at another landfill, this one south of Winnipeg, back in 2022. Meanwhile, police in Saskatoon began a landfill search on Wednesday in connection with the disappearance of Mackenzie Lee Trottier, who's been missing for 3 years. It's bittersweet news, though, for those who have been fighting for a landfill search in Winnipeg.
To be able to see how another province is doing basically the same work that we wanted to do from the get-go is kind of disheartening. It's very crucial that for the families and for leadership that we be able to bring our women home.
The federal and Manitoba governments have promised $40 million to begin the search, though no one will say when it will start. The daughter, Morgan Harris, says the wait is gut-wrenching.
It's telling Indigenous women that they are less than worth looking for. It's telling serial killers that it's okay to dispose of women's bodies in the landfill and that nobody will search for them. And it's telling Indigenous women that they are trash.
On top of that, families are bracing for a trial set to begin Monday for Jeremy Skibicki, the man charged with first-degree murder in their deaths. Families hope to have closure both in terms of the landfill search and the criminal trial well ahead of Red Dress Day 2025. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
A flood emergency grows in Brazil. The incredibly close calls as raging rivers overwhelm streets and bridges. Welcome back. Today marked the 3rd Orthodox Easter that Ukrainians have spent at war after Russia's invasion. President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Ukrainians to unite in common prayer. As Mike Armstrong reports, while civilians and soldiers paused for Sunday services, the fighting raged on.
They are soldiers not far from the front lines. The military chaplain's Easter message on this day, one of appreciation for their defense of the country. The message from the soldiers, one of longing. We miss our families, the first soldier says. Then the other adds, the holiday isn't the same when you're not at home. Well, homes are still being hit. There were multiple Russian drone attacks in eastern Ukraine this weekend. Easter may be one of the most important holidays for the Orthodox Church, but war didn't take the weekend off. I thought that at least on this day it would remain calm, this woman says. I don't sleep. I don't sleep at all. Now, there are prayers for peace on this day in Russian-controlled territory as well. Ukraine's port city of Mariupol fell to Russian troops in the spring of 2022. For me, this holiday means that my family, my country, all people live without war in happiness, this woman says. Let God help us in this. In an address to the country, the Ukrainian president called on citizens to pray for each other and for soldiers, but adding, Ukrainians kneel only in prayer, he says, and never before invaders or occupiers. Well, the Easter service in Odessa went ahead in a cathedral that was heavily damaged last summer. The Transfiguration Cathedral took a direct hit the night of July 23rd. A Russian missile attack hit several buildings in the historic center of the city. Repairs are underway. It was almost a complete loss, but there was still enough space for parishioners to celebrate. The Archdeacon says it doesn't matter if you mark Easter in a big church or a small church or in a ruined church. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
The catastrophic flooding is worsening in southern Brazil, where more major infrastructure is falling apart. New video today shows people barely avoiding falling into a river from this bridge. At least 75 people are now known to have died, and another 100 others are still missing. Over 88,000 people have been forced from their homes across hundreds of towns in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. In that state's capital, a major lake broke its banks by more than 2 meters, reaching its highest water level on record. The city's airport has also been shut down since May 3rd. Baby formula inflation, the rising cost and health risks worrying parents and doctors. Prices have risen all over the grocery store for a while now, and it's left some people struggling to pay for baby formula. Heidi Petracek looks at how much costs have soared, the potential solutions, and what some new parents are doing that has doctors concerned.
You ready?
Baby Tessa is 9 months old, and her mom, Caitlin Hughes, says the price of the infant formula she needs has gone up more than $10 in that 9 months.
And you can't do anything about it.
Hughes paid much less for formula for her first child, Taya, who's 2. The latest figures from Statistics Canada show just how tight the squeeze has become. The average monthly price for 900 grams of formula going from $28.83 in March of 2022 to $36.25 in March 2023, and reaching $42.88 in March of this year.
I think that it should have a cap on it, on either how much they're allowed to put it up in a year or just a flat rate.
Shortages of some infant formula ingredients are one factor hiking up the price. But one industry group is pushing Ottawa to update regulations to encourage more domestic production and increase local supply.
We're not able to produce formulas that are offered to families in Europe, the United States, Australia. So those are like-minded jurisdictions that we hope to encourage our government to look at.
The sole plant approved to make formula in the country, Canada Royal Milk, just came online with product expected to hit shelves this summer. Chang couldn't say if that would lower prices.
Either subsidizing it in the form of pharmacare or, like, for example, having these items added on to like a pharmacare list.
Nova Scotia family physician Dr. Matthew Abraham has been lobbying politicians to help either stabilize the price or put formula on provincial formularies after hearing how some patients are getting by.
They're actually diluting it, watering it down.
And that, he says, is a big concern because it deprives infants of the crucial nutrition they need for proper growth and development. Meanwhile, back at the Hughes house, the plan there is to keep stretching the budget for as long as Tessa needs formula. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Windsor, Nova Scotia.
The Queen of Pop's electrifying scene. Next, Madonna Mania shatters a record. Madonna put on the biggest performance of her career in Rio de Janeiro on Saturday for free. More than 1.6 million people flocked to Copacabana Beach for her concert, smashing her personal best for any of her shows. It marked the end of her Greatest Hits World Tour, celebrating her 40-year career. Last night in Boston, everything was on the line for Leafs Nation. For Leafs fans, scars run deep.
Every year, we think something different is going to happen. It's just ridiculous. Something needs to change.
Hopes shattered after another early exit. The Leafs Stanley Cup drought stretched to 57 years, losing 2-1 after that overtime collapse in the first round of the playoffs.
We were very happy after our first goal, and then it kind of just went down.
The Leafs have now lost 6 straight Game 7s, including 4 straight to Boston.
So sad and disappointed after that loss.
If there is a silver lining, it's that there's still 2 Canadian teams left to cheer for. And one of those teams is, of course, Edmonton, where people aren't cramming into Rogers Place only for the Oilers. They also want to cheer on women's basketball. Last night, a sold-out crowd of more than 16,600 people watched Canadian Kia Nurse and her WNBA team, the LA Sparks, face off against her old team, the Seattle Storm, in a preseason game. Nurse and the Sparks won 84-79. That's Global National for this Sunday. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Have a good night.